Hello and welcome to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. I'm Alex.
I'm Julio, and thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Help promote the algorithm and spread the word.
You can also find us on SoundCloud to subscribe and review. And don't forget to visit our main website, wearethecontrarians.com.
Follow us on Twitter at Contrarian Prime, and to like us on Facebook, visit facebook.com/Contrarian Prime.
And if you have the willpower to keep up with our pretentious ramblings, you can follow us individually at Contrarian Alex for myself and at Ovnio for Julio. That's OVNIO.
Now, time for the podcast. And we are recording for Contrarians Corner for After Earth, Chapter 3 of our Shyamalan anthology.
Hello, and welcome to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. My name is Alex, and I am joined, as always, by my cohort and co-host, Julio. Julio, we keep starting these with different tones of optimism and hope based on the global happenings that are going on. Based on today's news, though, not necessarily on the COVID front, but it's a strange time. The cracks are starting to form in your beloved Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's just an unprecedented time that we are living in all the way around. I'm not gonna bandwagon and pile on. I sent you and Eddie that story about how underperforming Black Widow was doing, and of course there's no relevancy to that considering what's going on in the world right now. But I will point and I will say, you're starting to implode with Scarlett Johansson now filing a lawsuit against Disney. Are we going to do this, Alex? Are we doing this early in the episode? I thought that we were going to save it for after hours, but I can crack my knuckles right now. We were talking for about a half hour beforehand, just catching up, and I made sure not to even go near the subject. So. More to come. We'll keep you apprised and up to date on the trial of the century, Scarlett Johansson versus the MCU.
Which will be someday adapted to screen by M. Night Shyamalan. And maybe Gary Whitta, too, since they seem to be such a good team.
So that brings us to After Earth, all that. As we continue on the Shyamalan anthology here, our summer project on the Contrarians, 2013. Julio, help me clarify this here. We got screenplay by Gary Whitta and M. Night Shyamalan, story by Will Smith. Now, in your experience in these things, does that just mean like he came up with the general concept of the movie and then they actually wrote the dialogue and, the fight scenes and action sequences and whatnot, or how does this work? Did he just come with like a napkin with like him and his son's name written on it that said After Earth, and so he had to get a credit for it?
Just like a crude drawing of Jaden Smith holding two swords. I'm not an expert on how credit adjudication works as far as how you get credit. I know that the process to determine credit is like if more than one person worked on the screenplay, then it gets submitted to this kind of board, and the board reads the different drafts of the screenplay, and then they decide, yes, Gary Whitta's screenplay and M. Night Shyamalan's screenplays are different enough, and they both have different elements that survived and made it into the movie. Therefore, they both get a credit. And I think I mentioned it on our last episode, or last time that we talked about After Earth. Maybe not. It might end up on Patreon, but the fact that they're not ampersanded, that doesn't say Gary Whitta ampersand M. Night Shyamalan, means that they were not working as a team. It means that there's a draft that's Gary Whitta's draft, and there's a draft that's M. Night Shyamalan's draft. And what I would be interested in knowing is how who came first. Like, if I had to guess, I would say that Will Smith had this idea to create a vehicle for him and his son, and approached Gary Whitta. I don't know if they knew each other. Like, it'd be interesting to see if there's any Gary Whitta screenplays that starred Will Smith. But let's say he goes to Gary Whitta and he's like, I have this idea. make it happen. And then Wida writes it, and then Shyamalan shows interest in the project, and then Shyamalan comes in and he's like, okay, I'll do it, but let me work on the script. And then Shyamalan does another draft. Or the other way around, where Will Smith approaches M. Night Shyamalan. He's like, hey, man, I saw The Happening and I saw Last Airbender. It sounds like you need a win. So here's this story. Shyamalan writes a script. They take it to the studio, and then I guess the studio is like, okay, but how about we bring Gary Whitta to like spice it up?
So yeah, Gary Whitta coming into, I imagine he would be one that we bring up first because, I mean, the other one's M. Night Shyamalan, the other one's Will Smith, so he would be the least noteworthy guy coming into this, but he was coming off the heels of the Book of Eli. He wrote the screenplay for, and then it looks like he's worked a lot in the video game industry, specifically with the Walking Dead video games. In 2016, he was one of 4 people that got a writing credit on Rogue One, a Star Wars story. So there you go.
Do you think in that writer's room, do you think they called him the After Earth guy?
Yeah. Hey, AE, what do you think about this?
You want to call your buddy Will Smith and ask him what he thinks about this?
That's like that SNL skit where Jonah Hill's like, oh, let me call my good friend Brad Pitt. And he dials the phone, he puts it on speaker, and it's like, the number you've called has been disconnected. That's him like trying to big time and say, I'm going to call Will Smith. Danger is real. Fear is a choice. As M. Night Shyamalan took us back to the theater in May of 2013. Looks like May 31st of 2013 was when this movie was released in IMAX. I do remember that being a big part of its marketing was got to see it in IMAX. As this rages on, as we mentioned, our Shyamalan anthology, we want to thank any and all returning listeners of the Contrarians. If this is your first time joining us, we appreciate you hanging on before we actually get to what it is we do here. Returning listeners, give us a moment here while we go down the rigmarole. Here on the Contrarians, we like to rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine. Find a movie on Rotten Tomatoes that is highly rated, a lot of times known as certified fresh, and make a case for maybe why that movie got a little bit overrated and a little bit too big for its own britches and what the critics maybe had wrong about it. Conversely, we'll find a movie that is lowly rated, one of those nasty green splotches, usually about 30% and below, those nasty green splotches known as rotten. What we'll do there is make a case for the positive merit in the film, some of the things that are good, the things that were overlooked or understated, what the critics maybe willfully or unknowingly didn't give proper credit to. But that comprises the first half of the podcast. That was Contrarians Corner, being that After Earth is 11% on Rotten Tomatoes, a nasty green splotch. This first portion here, we will be talking about it as though it was a modern marvel, a modern masterpiece. Julio, if listeners want to know how we really feel about this movie, though, they just have to hang around till the second half of the podcast.
That's correct. Once we get to the second half of the podcast, aptly titled Real Talk, that's where we share our true feelings about the movie. We share them with you, the audience, and we share them with each other. I would say about half the time, we don't really know how the other one feels. After Earth, I mean, man, that's a movie that I hadn't really thought about in a while. Alex had never seen it before, so it's not really something that has come even close to being part of our conversations. So, I don't know, Alex, you've been pretty like radio silent. Like with the last couple of Shyamalan Anthology episodes, I would get at least a text that would give me an entry point into what real talk may be like. But here, it's like, man, we started recording, you brought up COVID and the Scarlett Johansson lawsuit, so I don't really know what I'm in for.
Well, for those who maybe this is your first time listening, so far on the Shyamalan Anthology, we kicked it off with discussing The Happening on the live stream for The Cure, so that's what kind of brought us to the dance, so to speak. And since then, we've discussed The Last Airbender and Signs. So we've already been all over the place with M. Night, and this was my first time seeing this movie. You can't really be surprised with anything that comes your way with him. You just know that it's going to land somewhere, and you can't really be surprised where it lands.
I'm waiting for the Shyamalan twist in Real Talk, where you tell me that you think it might be better than The Sixth Sense.
Well, you'll be waiting quite a while for that, my friend.
That's what they call it, a twist, Alex.
So, how did you watch After Earth this evening for this podcast?
After Earth is thankfully streaming on Stars via
Nice.
Amazon Prime. So, yeah, not even a rental. It was just a free stream through Stars. How about you?
So your boy watched this on YouTube. It was in HD. The sound was particularly good. And it was an hour and 40 minutes of me trying to figure out if Will Smith had an accent that was fading in and out or if I was just going insane. So there you go. So Julio, After Earth, coming off the heels of, this was after The Last Airbender, correct?
Yes. Man,
Okay.
It is a miracle that M. Night Shyamalan didn't just give up. Because he had The Happening, The Last Airbender, and then After Earth. I mean, forget about quality. Just I'm talking about critical reception. That's 3 widely panned movies back to back.
Well, and don't forget, before The Happening was Lady in the Water.
True. But
So-
I would say that was...
They weren't
This
as
is-
universally reviled as these
Yeah.
three.
I think that it's a lot easier to find people that defend Lady in the Water than it is to find people that will go to bat for his next 3 movies. But we're gonna try.
Yeah.
We certainly did our best with The Happening and Last Airbender.
We'll give it a shot. It's like the Who Shot Mr. Burns, where Dr. Hibbert asked Chief Wiggum, can you figure this case out? Well, we'll give it a shot. It's my job. So 11% on Rotten Tomatoes. Will Smith, Jaden Smith. Produced by Jada Pinkett Smith, if you can believe it. So, again, like you just said, as was the style at the time, this did not go over well. What were critics saying about this movie, Julio?
All right, so I got a bunch of rotten quotes from the Rotten Tomatoes website. We'll start with Brian Gill from Mad About Movies podcast, who says, Will Smith and M. Night Shyamalan both at the peak of their respective Lost in the Woods career period. After Earth is a complete disaster. Were they both lost in the woods at that time? What was Will Smith coming from when he did After Earth?
Let's see here.
Because to me, not knowing where we are on Smith's filmography, to me it would be that, oh no, he was at the peak of his power because he just willed this into existence. Story by Will Smith. He walked up to them and he's like, my son will star in this, goddammit.
Coming into this for his acting performances, it would have been Men in Black 3 the previous year. Then, man, he didn't make a movie it was 7 pounds, and then he took it off till Men in Black 3 and then After Earth.
Okay, Brad Gill, calm down. Men in Black 3 is better than Men in Black 2.
Well,
Just to begin.
to be fair, in 2008, he made Hancock, and there's really no coming back from that at all.
That's not Lost in the Woods. That's Dead in the Woods.
That's Dead in the Water.
All right, next. Richard Probst from the independentcritic.com says, the memory of After Earth is so painful that I still feel like my eyes are burning. You think he watched it in IMAX? Is that what happened? Just
Probably.
too much? Jennifer Heaton from Alternative Lens says, at least something like Battlefield Earth is unintentionally hilarious. After Earth doesn't even have the dignity to be laughably bad. Bring in the big guns there.
Yeah.
Battlefield Earth, I mean, that's not a title that you throw around lightly.
No, as has been evident on this podcast, that we only reserve that for the most extreme situations.
When we mean business. And let's close with Felix Vasquez Jr. from Cinema Crazed, who says, it seems proud of its predictability only because we should feel privileged to watch Will Smith and his son act in a second movie together. Damn right we should feel privileged. It's like fucking Hollywood royalty on the screen there.
How old was Jaden Smith when this was made? Because he was like, I've never seen The Pursuit of Happiness, but he was like a little kid in that, right?
Yeah. I was shocked as I was watching this movie to realize that I've seen a handful of Jaden Smith movies. Because he was in Pursuit of Happiness. He was in the remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still with Keanu Reeves and...
No, he was?
Yeah.
That movie's not good. Yeah, it is Jennifer Connelly.
He's Jennifer Connelly's son.
Karate Kid. I knew he was in that.
In The Karate Kid, and now this one. So that's 4. If you had asked me, I would have said 1.
So he was 15, it looks like, when this movie was made. No, he would have been 14 when it was being filmed. So you're kind of over the wave at that point. Like 12 to 15 is like the worst time period in anyone's life, but like, yeah, he was kind of cresting at that point, but he's still got, God bless him. His voice cracks in several parts in this movie, and brother was working through a lot of things. So I'm gonna try to be as nice as I can to him, because we've talked about a lot in here. Don't blame the kids. It falls more on the director and what have you. So that sets the table. Julio, After Earth, clocking in with a budget of $130 million. It looks like it only had a $60 million box office in the United States,
Ooh.
but worldwide went on to have nearly $245 million. So internationally, man, they must love Will Smith and IMAX. So that's the only logic I can come up with. Yeah, as the Wikipedia page says, After Earth was panned by film critics. The film, however, grossed $243.8 million at the box office. So there you go. So one of the last things I want to set the table with before we go ahead and just break this sucker down, and that is in a 2015 interview with Esquire, Will Smith called the film the most painful failure of his career and expressed regret at leading his son into production. He also unfavorably compared the experience to Wild Wild West, which also underperformed expectations at the box office. That brings us to where we are, because Wild Wild West is notorious for being one of the all-time flops. So for him to compare it to that, I think that really sets an interesting tone that we're going to lean into. Now, it's not specifically called out in the movie, I don't think. They say it at any point in time, but based on some research I did, it said the movie's supposed to take place in 3071. So just a few years down the road.
Well, it's good to know that we still have about 1,000 years to catch up to that technology that they show in the movie, because they're creating wormholes to travel through space.
Yeah,
not even light speed, just opening portals.
And again, it's kind of with Snowpiercer, it was just like, you're fucked now. With this, it's you got a few years to figure your shit out. You got a few years to get your affairs in order. But very similarly, Earth becomes inhabitable. In the future, on a human-populated planet, Nova Prime, the Skrull alien race attempts to take it over with creatures called Ursas, which hunt by sensing fear. Peacekeeping organization, the Ranger Corps, defeat them with a fear-suppressing technique called ghosting.
They just don't return their calls.
Damn it. I was gonna make that same joke. But not before Ursas kill Senshi, the daughter of Rangers leader Cypher Rage. Katai, Cypher's son, blames himself for Senshi's death. He trains to become a ranger like Cypher, but is rejected while applying. Katai's mother, Faya, convinces Cypher to take Katai on his last voyage before retirement. It was 2 days away from retirement. During flight, however, their spaceship is caught by an asteroid shower, causing them to crash land on Earth, which the humans evacuated 1,000 years ago due to an environmental cataclysm.
Due to The Happening, right? That's how I read it. This was sort of a sequel to The Happening.
Interesting. I'm not sure about that, but
suddenly liking this movie a lot more.
Out of control, just action and chaos from the very beginning. And it starts like the first 5 or 10 minutes have Jaden Smith narration, but that doesn't really keep up. The voice, the tone of this movie, both metaphorically and literally, kind of shift all over the place. But I appreciate this movie right away, establishing that, yes, Will Smith is in this, but the star of this is going to be Jaden Smith. You know right away that this is his vehicle, and buckle up. Hit yourself to the bumper, because it's time to go.
It makes sense that this would come after Last Airbender, which was kind of the first chapter in the story that never got a second chapter. And here, this movie starts, and Shyamalan basically tells us the first chapter of the story in like 5 minutes. The whole story about how Earth went to hell, and we had to flee Earth and arrive on another planet, but that planet now is being attacked by aliens, and those aliens have a special monsters that sense fear, but then Earth developed its own army of protectors that fear no one. and therefore they're able to defeat those monsters. And so that's like a whole movie, and we get it in like 5 minutes because Shyamalan wants to get to the real story. He's learned that, for better or for worse, modern audiences don't have the patience to appreciate his usual slow, methodical approach to storytelling. That's what happened with Last Airbender, right? Everybody was like, man, it took you a whole movie to get him to master water, and there's 3 more elements? Fuck that. But here, no, he's like, all right, we're going to get straight to the point. Let's get to Jaden Smith and Will Smith button heads.
As we mentioned just a moment ago, Earth is gone. It seems to be fairly reoccurring over the past 6 months to a year. And also with just our own mortality being dangled in front of us every day with the situation in our world. Watching these movies where Earth kind of just wipes itself out or it can't sustain. It's like, yeah, this is very plausible. It's not... Every time we watch a movie like this, it becomes less and less science fiction for me. It's just like, well, let's hear them out. Let's see where this is going to go.
The science fiction element is that somehow humanity is still out there somewhere. That we make it out of the planet.
So these alien monsters, somewhere, who wrote A Quiet Place? Because I think they took note and said, alien killers that can't see. Interesting.
I think it was Jim. I think Krasinski wrote and directed it.
Let's see here. Directed it. Screenplay by John Krasinski, Scott Beck, and Brian Woods. So maybe they were all just like in a group screening of this in the IMAX together. Like,
well, look for the ampersands.
Yeah. So these alien monsters are fucking ruthless. There's some pretty intense violence in this for a PG-13 movie. There's a lot of impaling, and these aliens, like their version of a scarecrow, or these big trees where they just impale bodies on them 10 high. It's pretty wild, and it definitely sets a pretty terrifying idea of what could happen in an alien invasion. But naturally, you have Will Smith, cool as a cucumber. There's even like a literal shot of him just like walking through this field of aliens, just sauntering, and them not having, they can't sense him because he has no fear, because he's ghosting them. He's not returning their calls or their text messages.
He turned his phone off.
He went silent. Secret. He left him on red.
What else would you expect, though, from somebody called Cypher Rage? How awesome is that name, Alex? Isn't this movie just worth existing just for that name alone?
Absolutely.
I read it and then I heard it said out loud, and it was great. I like it. There's, Will Smith. This is Will Smith at, he's a superstar by now. It's like you don't put Will Smith in your movie to play a regular guy. You put him in your movie so that he can play a big personality. And in this case, it was crazy because just like, a month ago maybe, we guested on the Spit and Polish podcast with our friends Ryan Bartek, and we talked about the movie Soldier, which was about Kurt Russell kind of letting go of his usual charisma, his usual personality, to play this soldier that was almost completely unemotional. And I would argue that this is Will Smith's Soldier. He does the same thing to an even more successful degree than Kurt Russell, because this is Will Smith minus the charisma, but he still manages to emote. He'll throw like a couple of singers every now and then. He's not saying like "Welcome to Earth" or even "Welcome to After Earth," which would have been amazing. But he has a couple comments like that are funny, but at the same time, he's the ultimate kind of a dead-eyed professional, right? I guess that's what makes him so successful as a ghost. And so, to me, that was already, it's not just a cool name, but also that the personality that Will Smith brings to that part is great. And it wouldn't work if you were just casting a standard action star, because then you'd be like, oh, well, I've seen Steven Seagal do this plenty of times. But to see Will Smith kind of not be the Fresh Prince at all, and not be a Will Smith character per se,
we know him as just so boisterous and so Will Smith loud, getting jiggy with it, Will Smith. And then he's like so reserved. It's definitely a very a risky maneuver, but it makes this movie very memorable in the sense of Will Smith being so toned down. But
so intense too. Like there's one of his first exchanges with his son. Jaden asks him if he can be excused, and Will Smith goes, "Denied."
Yes. The very tense dinner scene, because damn it, it's still a family drama at the end of the day. Katai is not able to make it into the Ranger Corps, so there's this really tense dinner scene where he explains to his dad that he didn't get it, and he's obviously kind of pouting about it because he's still a kid after all. I mean, just like you said, it leads to not quite Family Stone levels of silverware being thrown across the table, but it's pretty intense. This is as good a time as any to bring this up, Julio. Jaden Smith in this movie, so much is asked of him, and I think he holds his own. He brings to the table what he can, and it's literally, this movie hinges on his shoulders. It's on his back, so to speak. So for it to be that young with this much responsibility, I think he brings the bacon.
Well, yeah, and I think that where this movie had an advantage that other similar endeavors that have usually gotten on our nerves didn't have. Like I'm thinking specifically of whenever we've criticized someone like Judd Apatow for bringing his kids into his movies and just kind of putting a lot on them that maybe they couldn't handle, right? In this case, there's two levels. There's two stories going on. There's the story of Cypher Rage and his son and Kitai, kind of where the story takes us is to where Kitai is going to have to prove himself, and survive the series of events that happen. But then outside of that, in the making of the movie, we're kind of seeing Jaden Smith being put through this trial by his own father, by Will Smith. Like, this Will Smith taking Jaden out of the kiddies pool and throwing him with the adults and saying, all right, I'm going to be here, but I'm going to be here as a supporting character. I'm not going to be holding your hand like I did in Pursuit of Happiness. This is really going to be on you. And that story, as exciting as all the stuff with the monsters is and the science fiction aspect of it, what's really exciting to me as I was watching it was seeing Jaden Smith, the actor, really putting in the work to live up to his father's expectations, like to Will Smith's expectations. Kitai living up to Cypher's expectations, that was cool. But Jaden living up to Will Smith's expectations was even cooler. And I was rooting for Jaden the actor almost as much, if not more, than I was rooting for Kitai the character, and that was cool. Like that's the movie playing on both levels, and I imagine because there's such a high profile family that I think that aspect of it wasn't lost on most people. I imagine everybody going had that same experience. Now, whether they reacted to it as positively as I did, that's probably more debatable, right? I wonder if that. It's actually what turns some people off, just perceiving this as
nepotism.
Yeah, I wonder if like critics and audiences felt that this was just nepotism from Will Smith, and therefore they turned against the movie instead of seeing it as like this really cool thing. I mean, I don't know, Alex. How do you feel about nepotism? Do you think, as I do, that sometimes it's okay?
Yeah, I mean, Shane McMahon's awesome. Whenever people bring up nepotism, I'm like, Shane McMahon fucking rules. That's my fallback argument. Yeah, I mean, it's going to bite you in the ass, Godfather 3 style every once in a while, but sometimes it's like Jaden Smith wouldn't get a fair shake anywhere else because he is Will Smith's kid, so the best way to showcase him is Will Smith just saying, fuck it, my kid's going to be the star of this movie, because, the burden and responsibility that it comes along. God, I can't even imagine what it's like to be Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie's offspring. Like, just the profound responsibility that comes along with that. And not to be sexist here. I mean, Jaden's mom is Jada Pinkett Smith, a very talented actress in her own right. So in situations like this, it's what's called for. So that's a good call out. It's not all that episode of The Office where Michael's nephew comes to work and it turns out really poorly. Nepotism can really pay off sometimes.
Yeah, it's necessary. I think that it was... as a father, I think it's a good move because, it builds character for his son. As a professional, it's a good move because Will Smith knows he's not going to be around forever and he needs a worthy successor. So he just started getting Jaden ready. I mean, Pursuit of Happiness.
He's laying his seeds. He's, he's making his harvest. He's seeing what the crops are going to grow.
Like, Jaden, this is not quite your Independence Day, but it's a step to getting you there.
So they go on this voyage. He takes... Jaden along with him, and things end up going wrong. They go into an asteroid field, and the ship basically spins out of control. As we mentioned, they end up crash landing on Earth. As the ship's going down, though, man, Will Smith takes a hellacious spill. Like, my note just says here, did Will Smith just die? Because I I've never seen this before, and I don't really know. I hadn't known too much about it going in, so I didn't know if it was like a Scream type deal where Drew Barrymore dies in the first 20 minutes of the movie type thing. So when he takes this nasty spill down the ship, and then part of the ship, like the hull gets ripped open, and people are getting sucked out, and eventually the crash landing happens on Earth, and Will Smith is in bad shape. Both of his legs get broken, right?
Yeah, one worse than the other, according to him.
Well, he has to give himself like MacGyver style surgery, and he's bleeding bad. He's bleeding really bad. And during the crash, the one thing that can help them get back home is like this beacon that sends out a signal, like an SOS distress type thing. And it was hurled from the wreckage and is it like a mile away or something? It's
he said it in kilometers, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's not walking to the end of your driveway. He's got to go on a jaunt here across the terrain, and he tells his son, he's like, "Do you know where we are? We're on Earth." And so they need the beacon, or he tells them straight up, "We're gonna die." During the crash, they had one of those USASs. They had one of the URSI. They had one of the A Quiet Place monsters on board, and it was thrown. They don't know where it is. There's the three options where Will Smith's like, it's either dead, it's injured and in retreat, or it survived and it is loose and on the hunt. I wonder which one it's going to turn out to be. But from here, Cypher tells Katai, he's like, you're going to have to go out and get this, but they have like their little bodysuit gimmicks where there's like a camera on the front, a camera on the back. He's like, I will be your eyes and ears, and I will guide you through this. And this becomes like a Metal Gear Solid type thing where Otacon, in this case, is Will Smith. And the first part of this here, when he wanders out of the ship, it plays out like a tutorial from a video game.
Yep.
Where he's like telling him, do this, do that. And it's almost like an immersive experience for a viewer because you're learning these things along with Katai. It's unique. It
kind of highlights just how badly they drop the ball in most video game adaptations. The narrative, and I know it's changed a little bit, but not enough, in my opinion, to where people just say, well, it's impossible to make a good video game movie or to make a good video game movie that would be faithful to the experience of playing the game. And it was like, okay, well, After Earth did it, and there isn't even a game that it was based on. But you're right. I mean, from the moment that they crash, it really feels like a video game, but you don't feel left out. Like Will Smith even like shows him a map, like the map of where he's gonna travel, and points out the stages. Like, and this one looks like a waterfall, and here you're gonna have to fly, and he check his inventory. He has like 4 little things that he has to take every 24 hours so he can breathe on Earth's now toxic atmosphere. And he has a weapon that has like 22 combinations or something. It's like a video game, but you never, because the argument is like, well, you can't adapt a video game to follow the video game structure because that's not a movie. Well, Exhibit A, I point you to After Earth. They did it, and it was great. So maybe you just need the right talent behind the camera.
Got to have the right cards to play. Yeah, you're exactly right. He has to ration out his supplies and got to keep count of what you got. Intermittently here, flashbacks to Senshi, his daughter, being killed by one of the monsters. We see basically just she was cornered and killed. She couldn't channel the ghosting. She obviously was very scared, and it's what took her. It says here that she was played by Zoe Kravitz.
Do you know her from anything?
X-Men First Class.
I don't remember her in X-Men First Class. And
she has the wings.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to ask you if you remember her from our favorite movie that is just okay, Fury Road, which I guess she was one of the brides of the bad guy.
Oh, cool. Not going to get me to rewatch that movie, but
she made more of an impression in this one.
Oh yeah. Very, very beautiful, but very commanding presence, and it is your typical flashbacks that you see in movies, and when it's a character that longs for, someone who's passed, because it's all just very positive memories, birthdays, things like that. But we do see bit by bit, and eventually in full, the full how it played out, how she was killed, and it seems like both Katai and Cypher blame themselves for it. So it's kind of like this thing that's tormenting him and something they're having a really, really hard time letting go of.
Yeah, Cypher blames himself for not being there, and Katai blames himself for being there and not intervening. Even though to all of us, it's pretty clear that he wouldn't have been able to do anything about it.
Yeah, it's like a fucking monster came and ate her. It's not going to be too much you can do. Sorry, Julio, if we're in that same situation, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to save you. It's just the way the cookie crumbles.
I wouldn't. I probably would have been too in shock to notice what you're doing or what you're not doing. I'd be like, holy shit, it's one of the Ursas from After Earth.
The last thing you see is me just like sprinting in the opposite direction. Like that motherfucker.
I
as
really,
much as I can sprint.
The biggest reason to maybe buy the After Earth Blu-ray is so that I can check the deleted scenes in that final flashback where Zoe Kravitz is dying and the monster has left, and so Katai crawls over to her to talk to her before she dies, and she just goes, "Tell Meryl to swing away." Didn't you get the sign vibes with these flashbacks? I mean, these have to have been Shyamalan's contribution to the screenplay.
Mm-hmm.
There's that whole gimmick of slowly revealing how a character died and how it affected the protagonist. I mean, it's fine. It worked in Signs. It worked in this movie. It gave me an emotional anchor to understand why Katai, who's a pretty capable ranger. Okay, so he didn't make ranger, but he seems a pretty resourceful kid. But then every time that the Ursa is brought up, he freezes. He starts shaking and panicking. Well, I get it because I've seen what happened to his sister and he witnessed it firsthand.
You know, it's kind of stepping outside the Shyamalan anthology, but going to something that's been recent in our history and familiar is we get another primate attack here on our Ad Astra episode that I had plugged a little bit earlier. We get the really out of nowhere primate attack, and it looks like animals rule the world. They rule Earth now. It is their kingdom, and Jaden wanders a bit too far down the beaten path and is confronted by a whole horde, a swath of angry, looks like potentially rabid chimps. And he runs and jumps in the water to avoid them, correct?
Yeah, they throw something at him, and my first thought is like, are they throwing feces at him? but no, because then it kind of bounces off. So that was a missed opportunity for M. Night Shyamalan, or an incredible show of restraint, because unlike Signs, the comedy is a lot more subdued here, very controlled. How did you like that line? That one of my favorite lines in the movie, where Jaden has this suit that I guess responds to the environment, and so when he's in danger, the suit senses it before he does, and so the suit turns black before the apes attack, and he goes, "Dad, my suit just turned black. I think it's cool, but I don't know why," or something like that.
Yeah,
good stuff. Good writing.
Once he wanders away from the primates, he gets bitten or stung by like a leech, or obviously this is in the future, so there's some things in here we're not accustomed to, but it looks like a nasty bug of some sort, like burrowed into the top of his hand. It's a parasite is what it is, because it stings him. His whole body starts swelling up like fucking Elephant Man, and he has to give himself almost like an adrenaline needle to the heart. It's a anti-venom shot. Sadly, Will Smith does not yell, "Just get the shot," and doesn't yell about a felt pen. But he tells him he has to flop on the ground to make sure it like jabs all the way into his chest. It's pretty intense.
I'm choosing to believe that the way that Jaden Smith was puffing up was a very deliberate reference to Will Smith's similar incident in Hitch, which you've seen.
I've still never seen Hitch, no.
Oh, well, I'll ruin a joke for you, Alex. There's a moment where he goes on a date with Eva Mendes, and he eats something that he's allergic to, and he didn't know. And so I think this might have been in the trailer, where the shot is her. You just see her react horrified, and then Will Smith goes like, "What?" And then you get the shot of him, and he looks just like Jaden Smith looks before he puts the antidote, the anti-venom in his heart. He is just swelling up. which I think that was nice. That was nice of M. Night Shyamalan, kind of like paying tribute to Will Smith's previous entries in his filmography.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of a callback for the real fans, the true fans.
Those of you who came to the party for Will Smith.
I think you may have misunderstood what I do exactly.
Jaden eventually recovers here. Katai, he's paralyzed for a short period of time due to the agent that was injected into him. But once he recovers, he wakes up, and this is, Cypher's in really bad shape. He's starting to... He's getting on the gimmicks some. He's found some painkillers and he's taking these shots, and he just looks more and more pitiful every time we cut back to him. But he's still trying to power through, and this is, not in his moment of most despair, but he's definitely realizing, this could not work out well in the end. And this is where we get his Oscar clip where he talks about getting like stabbed by one of the monsters and thinking he was going to die and kind of realizing what it's all about type thing and looking at the sun or something. It's some really dark speech kind of out of nowhere given the context of this scene. So Will Smith just...
For your consideration.
Yeah, thank you. He's known so much for his verbose delivery and comedy, and sometimes even physical comedy, and even in his award caliber films like Ali, he's still playing someone who was very loquacious and larger than life in Muhammad Ali. Here, it's just such a dark monologue about dying and like realizing your mortality, and it's not the worst thing in the world if you die type thing. It's very haunting, but also very powerful. Yeah,
basically, it's a setup for eventually for Jaden to learn how to ghost on his own, because Cypher is explaining how did he finally ghost, and that was when it's not a titular line, it's a tagline line, because he says the tagline of the movie. That's when he tells Jaden that danger is real, but fear is a choice. And when he realized that, then he stopped being afraid, and then he became, he learned how to ghost. And so, yeah, it's great. It's also awesome because by now, they're both keeping secrets from each other, because Will Smith is not letting on how bad he has it in the ship. He hasn't told, he has a computer that tells him like how fucked up he is, and basically that he needs to get help soon or he's going to die. And Jaden hasn't told Will Smith that when he was running away from the monkeys, 2 of his 4 vials of oxygen that he had broke. So now he doesn't really have enough to complete the mission. So I thought that was awesome that they have this really intimate moment where he's sharing that story, but they're also pretending that they're doing much better than they really are.
Yeah, it's a definitive like male tough guy type thing too. These defense mechanisms that they put up, and the excuses they're trying to make. And he eventually makes Jaden show him like what happened to his inhalers, and he's like, "I can make it, sir. I can make it." And
okay, so now this is his Oscar clip.
Correct.
Jaden's.
We segue directly from one Oscar scene to another. This is where he basically tells his dad, you think I'm weak and you think I can't do this, but I can. And he's pretty emotional while saying all this. But you got to give him credit. Like I said, there's a lot on his shoulders here, and he's clearly in front of a green screen, so God knows what he was actually like told to act at. M. Night Shyamalan just was eating, some mahi mahi, and he's like, when I hold up my fork, stare at this and act at this.
Will Smith wasn't even on set.
Yeah, he was in his camper playing fucking, 2013, so PlayStation 3 or something, I don't know.
I detected graviton vibrations in the hull.
As we mentioned already, this is where we get the full exposition and the full scene of the daughter, Senshi, being killed. It melds their 2 stances together, and also, I think, gives them a common reason to keep going, to kind of live the way that they would have wanted her to and keep going on for her. It is definitely the motivating factor for them.
But it's also kind of like a key departure from what you would expect at this specific moment in this type of movie, because Jaden doesn't go the whole like, I hate you route, which, that's usually how this argument between a teenager and the dad ends, with Jaden going like, I hate you, fuck you, and then, taking off. At the same time, Will Smith doesn't absolve him from anything. When Jaden is yelling at him, telling him like, "What should I have done? Do you think it's my fault?" and whatever, Will Smith doesn't say, "No, it's not your fault." He says, "What do you think? Do you think it's your fault?" Which is, I mean, it's a pretty brutal thing for his father to say, for Jaden's father to say. So I like that this big fight, it didn't really resolve it in the sense that, oh, well, from here on, we bury the hatchet and we keep moving. Like, they move forward, but they move forward still with all that baggage. In fact, I mean, Jaden ends up disobeying a direct order from his superior because he just jumps off that cliff, even though Will Smith was asking him to come back, was ordering him to come back to abort the mission. How did you like this sequence of Jaden flying and being pursued by the giant eagle, by the symbol of America?
The Avatar scene?
Yes.
Where they're flying near the waterfall. And yeah, I mean, it was very comparable to Avatar, and it was a visual treat just watching this all play out. It ends up this giant bird that was hunting them. We end back up in their nest. I guess it's the mama bird. And there's like these, I guess, evolved what lions or tigers will look like in the future type thing. These creatures coming in and hunting the birds. And I didn't like this, man. There was no forewarning. All these baby birds die. And like the mom tries to like bring them back to life. And it's really fucking sad. Really pissed me off. Because I was not expecting this. I just wanted I wanted Jaden Smith to figure out how to get on its back and ride it. Like, that's all I was hoping would come from this scene. But instead, you get animals dying, which is something that we've talked about recently. I do not care for.
I'll give this to Shyamalan. At least he has moved forward because, you know, we were talking just in the science episode that he kills 2 dogs in that movie for no reason. That doesn't, there's no follow-up. But then in this one, the tragedy of that bird losing its offspring pays off because so these tigers, Jaden ends up fighting them off. And he doesn't really get to save any of the little chicks, but even though we don't know at the time, it looks like this giant bird, the eagle, noticed that Jaden tried at least. And then later on in the movie, the bird saves his life. So there's a reason. I think that he could have made the same point without killing the birds. but I guess maybe this was Gary Whitta's contribution. And he was like, hey, how about we kill the birds? that will make it more exciting. Actually, no. Based on the history, maybe Shyamalan was like, hey, let's kill the birds. And Gary Whitta was like, okay, well, if we have to kill the birds, at least let's give him a purpose.
And they do. This bird comes back into the fray not too long down the road here. In this whole fracas, communication's severed. His little Buzz Lightyear gimmick on his arm with his radio gets ripped off. All of his resources are gone. He is literally up a creek without a paddle here because he gets on like a little piece of wood and just falls asleep going down this creek. And this is where we get like his dream where he speaks to his sister one last time and like, you know, the you got to forgive yourself type thing. When he does come to, Earth is so fucked in the future that at like random points in time, it'll just freeze over like instantly. So he tries to find some shelter, like a hot spot or something to protect himself from this weather, and he's not able to, and this is where the bird comes back in, and basically to thank him for trying to help, this massive bird sacrifices itself to protect Katai and help him survive, you know, this freezing. I thought it was going to be, again, like a thing where they become friends, but the bird just dies, like, right away. Like, it literally just sacrifices its life after saving him.
Gary Whitta is like, okay, and then the bird saves him. And Shyamalan is like, okay, but then the bird dies. Okay, compromise. So while all this is happening, though, because we're cut off from Will Smith, we get very little Will Smith in this sequence. Like, we see one moment where he realizes that there's nothing else he can do. He's lost communication, so he records a message for his wife saying, honey, I lost a kid. End recording. That's it. But this is where the movie really does it. That you've had about a third of the movie where it was kind of a two-hander. Will Smith and Jaden Smith side by side, communicating. But then once his equipment is broken, it's mostly Jaden Smith, and we're focused on him. He's the one carrying the movie. Mm-hmm. The experiment is happening before our eyes. It's like Will Smith letting his son go and telling him, all right, sink or swim. And he swims. He makes it to the other side.
He does. He finds the ship. He finds the more inhalers, so he's able to, regenerate his health. He finds the beacon that they need, but he also finds that the Urass, whatever, the monster is on the loose. And we see also, because there's some of the crew members that have been strewn up on trees and shit. So this thing is out and it's hunting for blood. And eventually, quickly, he comes across him.
The key thing here, though, is that the beacon and I guess everything else in that ship, they're using AT&T for their communications because he doesn't get signal right away. So he can't shoot the beacon from where they are. And he can't even communicate, even though he replaces his wrist communicator. It's only so that Will Smith can see him and can hear him, but Jaden can't. So Jaden doesn't know that his father is watching him again. And so now we have Will Smith kind of like in horror watching as his son is being hunted by this creature, just like his sister was way back then.
Yeah, and he is in rough shape. Like, it looks like he can barely even move. Like, he looks drunk, but also just like on death's door. His eyes are super red and swollen. He's having a hard time, and that's obviously compounded by the fact that he's possibly watching his son die, or about to. So the monster and Katai get into the big rumble, and he at first is like outquicking it and outsmarting it and getting away that way. But eventually they get to like a level playing field, like this plateau, and he just gets fucked up. Like, he gets thrown into a rock, and then he even like semi-hulks him, like Hulk and Loki in the first Avengers movie. He like picks him up and slams him onto the ground, and he's bleeding and in rough shape. And then he's starting to like, the words of his dad are repeating through his head about how to like calm himself, and he starts ghosting. He does it. He's a ghoster, and the monster like walks right over him and doesn't even sense him, and then he's able to get up and start just piecing this fucker apart with his sword, and eventually brutally kills this thing before sounding the beacon and getting the help that they need.
The whole time the Ursa is just looking at its phone, going like, but why wouldn't he text back?
So they're rescued. They get Cypher and immediately start doing the work they need to on him. Cypher, is being worked on and is still in fucking bad shape. It's going to be a while for him to recover, but he insists on getting up to salute his son, to like let him know, you're one of us now. You're a true Ranger. You've made it. Very emotional. He gets up and he has to be like fucking propped up, but he still is able to salute him and let him know, I love you, son.
Jaden's having none of that, though. Jaden just runs and hugs him. And then this movie, Alex,
just
at least
breaking protocol.
Yeah. By my count, this movie has maybe 3 big, like, funny moments that are, moments that are meant to be funny. And all 3 of them land like gangbusters. Like that, I mentioned the line that he had about his suit going black. And then there's this moment here at the end when he hugs him and he says, Dad, I think I want to work with Mom. and Will Smith, he quips back. He's like, me too. And then there's a moment earlier in the movie when the ship's about to hit that meteor shower, and Will Smith is telling the pilots, I think this is going to happen. And then one of the pilots goes like, well, sir, how often are you wrong? And then Will Smith, he doesn't even smile, but he says,
My wife would give a very interesting answer to that question.
It was like, it's such a deadpan joke, and it works because it's Will Smith saying it. But overall, I would say this is probably the least amount of comedy I've seen in an M. Night Shyamalan movie. And it works, so that's good. And
then that's it, right? That's what takes us home.
Yeah, I think we just pull back to see the planet, maybe. And I think that's honestly the big subplot with the eagle. As much as we disliked the animal abuse, so to speak, I think it's meant to show us that if the eagle can create a bond with this kid, if the eagle can, forgive this kid for its trespasses, maybe planet Earth can eventually forgive humanity and welcome humans again. Because the big line that Will Smith has when they first arrive, when they first crash land on Earth, he goes, this is a planet that has evolved to kill humans. It as a way to protect itself, which again goes back to this being sort of a sequel, if not direct, maybe a spiritual sequel to The Happening. The Happening is about the planet starting to defend itself, and here, in a way, we see what happens when that is taken to the finish line. The planet became so hostile towards humans that humans had to flee the planet. But maybe there's hope. The eagle chose to save Jaden instead of killing him, so maybe it's possible for humans to come back to Earth and tame the beast again. I don't know. After Earth 2.
Really makes you think, doesn't it? Well, that was After Earth. It's remarkably bland.
Is it sci-Y?
Sci-Y? Man, I guess. I don't know. I'm just so absolutely ambivalent towards this movie. We'll see if our discussion in the second half leads to me beginning to actively dislike it. So, Julio, are you ready to carry this on over to Real Talk?
Let's go to Real Talk.
What was I supposed to do? What did you want me to do? She gave me an order. She said no matter what, don't come out of that box. Was I supposed to just come out and die?
What do you think, Cadet? What do you think you should have done? Because really, that is all that matters. What do you think you should have done?
And why were you? She called out for you. She called your name. And you weren't there because you're never there. And you think I'm a coward? You're wrong. I'm not a coward. You're the coward. I'm not a coward.
Qatar!
And we are back. But before we go into Real Talk, let's do PP. That's our patron pitch. This is where we tell patrons what they can expect in our patron feed, and also where we let non-patrons know what they're missing out on. This month, Alex, we started, I mentioned it a couple episodes ago, we finally started our quick video reviews perks over on the patron feed. I can tell you they're like the test videos, which are full video reviews right now. They're on the movie Mustang and on the movie Sinister. I did those unprompted. They were just kind of like me trying to figure out the format. But then we started getting the patron part of it. And our friend and patron Nerdrovert, he told me, okay, well, do the Squid and the Whale and do Striptease. As of this recording, Alex, I haven't had the fortitude to do Striptease, to watch the movie Striptease. That sounded weird. But I did watch The Squid and the Whale, which is a movie from one of your favorite filmmakers, Noah Baumbach.
Yes.
I'm not going to tell you how I felt because that's what the quick video review is for. That is up on our Patreon channel, and I imagine by the time that you guys listen to this episode, the Striptease quick video review will be up as well. I expect them to be two wildly different video reviews, but that's what makes it so much fun. So in addition to be able to check that stuff out, you'll also get access to all the clips, the audio clips that don't make it into our regular episodes. You also have access to our pre-recording notes, and of course, access to Contrarians After Hours. That's the spin-off mini show where we talk to you about other things that we're watching, that we're reading, that we're playing. Alex, what are you bringing to Contrarians After Hours this time around?
I had mentioned it last time, and this time we will be discussing 3 from Hell, the most recent Rob Zombie movie that it took me multiple goes to finally get through it completely. So I have finished it. I have thoughts on it.
I would be so disappointed if you didn't have thoughts. If you finished and you were like, eh.
My tumultuous relationship with Rob Zombie parallels my relationship with professional wrestling to where it's like an abusive relationship. I just think he's going to change and be better. And I just go back and it's oh so frustrating. So we'll talk about 3 from Hell. That's what I'm bringing on my end. Julio, what are you bringing to the table?
This leads into what I'm bringing. Our friends from from the Yum Yum podcast, which I've mentioned before because I've guested on their show once. It's Ryan from Spit and Polish has this Yum Yum podcast, which is a podcast he does with his wife, Rachel, and where they talk about Star Trek Discovery. Except Star Trek Discovery, it's on hiatus. They finished their third season. The fourth season hasn't come out yet, and Ryan and Rachel have already covered everything Star Trek Discovery related that's out. So they've pivoted to Babylon 5, a classic sci-fi show from back in the day. And so I was like, well, what better time to start watching Babylon 5 than now, where I can watch it and then listen to Ryan and Rachel talk about it. So I've watched about the first 10 episodes of Babylon 5. It's one of those old TV shows back in the day when each season was like 22, 24 episodes. And this show has 5 seasons, so I probably will be watching it for the rest of 2021. But I watched the first 10 episodes. I have thoughts. I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you how it compares to Star Trek, specifically Star Trek The Next Generation. It's worth talking about. And then, because it's been a while since we've talked about a documentary on my end, I also watched the documentary Beyond Clueless. And they're talking about Clueless, the movie. And it's kind of a visual essay on the genre of teenage movies. Which I know is something that you appreciate as much as I do, maybe even more. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. Beyond Clueless, Babylon 5, and 3 from Hell. That is an after-hour segment that's going to go all over the place. If any of that sounds interesting, then visit patreon.com/contrarianprime, and you can check out all our tiers and see if there's anything that makes you want to join the Contrarian supplements.
Absolutely. We have $1, $3, $5, and $10 tiers. Take a look, see what you like, see what you want access to. Just scrounge up some change. It's only $1. Come on. Throw a little change our way. You'll get access to exclusive content. Also be able to add some things into Contrarians Canon. So check it out. All of our current patrons, love you all. If you guys have any requests or anything further that you'd like to see us add to our patron game, do not be shy. Let us know.
Also, our bonus episode every month comes courtesy of one of our patrons. This month, the aforementioned Ryan, he's giving us the movie Hancock. Hancock is going to be our bonus episode for August. As we were just discussing off mic, how appropriate that we open August with After Earth and we close August with Hancock. Two massively, reviled, misunderstood.
This is better than Hancock.
I haven't seen Hancock in a while, but I'll tell you this: Hancock has Jason Bateman, and After Earth doesn't. So there may be something there.
I might be onto something with this.
Yeah. Anyway, Hancock, you can blame /thank our patrons for that, and then patrons will get exclusive access to just this patron-only episode that we have coming up on Natural Selection, which we've been teasing for about a month. Alex actually plugged it a while ago and finally made me watch it, and now I'm ready. Let's talk about that movie. That's happening also in August.
Hell yeah. Rachel Harris, back again. So with that in mind, Julio, I think it's time to travel to 3071 and try to make some sense out of this movie, which may be difficult to do. So, Julio, why?
Well, I think the why is pretty easy to figure out.
Yeah, it's a Will Smith movie.
Well, the why and why in this case would be, we joked about it in Contrarians Corner, but it's, how could it be anything other than Will Smith wanting to further the career of his son?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, that is prejudgment. I mean, I'm not going to tell you if that's good or bad, but obviously I wouldn't read it this way if I wasn't familiar with Will Smith's family tree. But then again, like I said in Contrarians Corner, who isn't? Or at least who wasn't back then? So there's no way that you went to watch After Earth and you didn't know that was Will Smith and that was his son. And I would imagine that some of the marketing at least mentioned that that Will Smith was behind it. That, I mean, I figure most of the people going to watch it, they didn't know that this was a Will Smith story, that's how it originated. But still, it's just kind of weird. Jaden Smith, I don't know that he was a big enough name, even with, a handful of movies that he had made as a kid, to headline this project. But maybe he was, because like that quote in Contrarians Corner mentioned, this was there was a weird time in M. Night Shyamalan's career, to me at least, and correct me if it doesn't look that way to you, but to me it looks like Will Smith wanted a vehicle for his son and got a hold of a director that was coming off two really badly received movies, so was probably, would have been receptive to to Will Smith's efforts, not going to argue too much with like, okay, well, I'll cast your son as the main character. And a studio will be like, sure, why not? It worked so well last time that we put them together. The two Smiths, I mean, not Shyamalan. So to me, that's like pretty easy. It's just like it's a Jaden Smith vehicle concocted by Will Smith with M. Night Shyamalan sort of as an assistant. Like, was it you that kind of remembered that this wasn't even sold as an M. Night Shyamalan movie, or was that The Last Airbender that wasn't sold as an M. Night Shyamalan movie?
I remember both of these coming out, and with M. Night, I want to say it was this one. I know we talked about that in The Last Airbender. Because, I didn't really know what it was. For neither of these, it wasn't like a big part of it. It wasn't like the guy that brought you The Sixth Sense. Because he was already trailing at this point. And no matter who you are, I don't even know if fucking Bobby De Niro would have top billing over Will Smith. So that's just not going to happen.
But do you see like somebody like, I mean, this wouldn't have fit, but like Scorsese wouldn't play along. Like, let's say, right? Like, or Spielberg, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, Spielberg is such a nice guy, but I can just see like a director going like, look, I like you and the story's kind of cool, but we're not going to cast your son. Like he's a cute kid, but I need somebody that's like a little more experienced, or I need somebody that, can carry the movie. And, we'll get to his actual performance, I guess, in a little bit. But to me, it seems like a very specific time, like, for them to grab Shyamalan, especially Shyamalan, who I guess, he has a very clear idea of how he wants things. And this feels more like a side job, like not really like a very personal story. It's just he got recruited to direct this movie, and that was more like it.
I got to be honest with you. With this, I was just like, this is bad, but it might have been overhyped because a lot of people have told me this is the worst M. Night Shyamalan movie. And I guess the biggest thing is like, talk about not really going out of your way to say that M. Night was attached. It does not feel like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Kind of similar to Last Airbender. Maybe that's the whole point. At least with like The Happening, he had the audacity to be M. Night Shyamalan making a bad movie, not just making a bad movie, if that makes any sense at all.
Yes. Let's go through the quotes and then we can actually get into it because
let's do it.
All right. So just a handful of fresh quotes from that 11% that liked it. David Nussair from Real Film Reviews says, a step in the right direction for beleaguered filmmaker M. Night Shyamalan.
Beleaguered.
Poor guy. Jim Shrembury from 3AW says, by any fair measure, After Earth is actually quite a nifty, pacey adventure film, even though it was directed by M. Night Shyamalan, who has not made a good film since his 1999 debut, The Sixth Sense.
Whoa.
Wow, that is one of the harshest M. Night Shyamalan takes I've read or heard. Because, I mean, most people would agree, shit, we were singing the praises of Signs a couple episodes ago. And then there's Unbreakable.
It's a great movie.
I mean, yeah. John Nickham from Kansas City Star says, Director Shyamalan gets the most out of the Smiths, sometimes simply staying out of their way. He also keeps things moving briskly with a story that eschews exposition in favor of flashback glimpses. He does stay out of their way. That's, that's why it doesn't feel like a Shyamalan movie. And finally, Sean O'Connell from Cinema Blend says, it's an admirable YA adventure, a moderately engaging piece of sci-fi storytelling, a return to respectability for Shyamalan, and a welcome departure for an aging Will Smith. An aging Will Smith? How old is Will Smith in this movie?
It's not like he's some old actor we need to take out to pasture. Jesus.
Yeah. A return to respectability for Shyamalan? I mean, I guess.
Yeah, Will Smith's only 52 today.
He was in his 40s. He was done.
You're out of here.
Anymore. Not to jump to the end, but I think maybe it's appropriate to put at the beginning. You have The Happening, you have Last Airbender, and now you have this. Even if you don't like After Earth, would you say, as a movie, it's a step up from Last Airbender?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I agree.
It's not the mess that Last Airbender is. It's not good in any conceivable way. Okay, since we're in real talk, am I crazy, or was Will Smith like weaving in and out of an accent in this movie?
Kind of. I noticed it more with his wife and with Zoe Kravitz, which leads me to believe that maybe he was supposed to also have an accent. Jaden doesn't even try, right? No.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm like really drawing a blank with this. When this was over, it was just so inconsequential. I was just like, yeah, that wasn't good. But when what we're dealing with here is M. Night Shyamalan, the king of like bad movies in some aspects, and I couldn't even really find interest in this in the story of his career, because like we've talked about, obviously The Happening and Last Airbender and the ups and downs that he's been through, and this just kind of, it seemed to me like a movie that was made to make money in IMAX and made a killing in the international market. It's a Will Smith movie, so there's going to always be some notoriety that comes with that. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It makes sense how this was made, more so than his other stuff, and that's part of the interest with M. Night Shyamalan and the intrigue about either the quality or the disastrous content is not there with this. It's just a bad movie, but I can believe everything about it. I am curious about Will Smith's thing about how, it's a failure, because he made this movie. You think he might have, I wonder if he knew that like halfway through production, or if it was like after that.
I am curious to see how he feels about his son's performance, because that's a really harsh thing to say about. Well, I guess in that quote you said that he felt bad for putting his son through it. So I guess in his mind it's just a failure, more of the production / Shyamalan side. But just to kick things off, really, I will tell you this. I was just saving it, but it's like I actually had an okay time watching it. Like I'm actually borderline trying to decide if I actually like it. Like, not, I don't think it's a good movie, but once again, like on the heels of Last Airbender and The Happening, I'm like, this is watchable, And I think that a lot of it has to do with Will Smith. Even when he's playing this weird character, even with the inconsistent accent, and even with playing a character that is so different, it doesn't play to his strengths. Like I made the joke about Soldier in Contrarians Corner, and it's a little bit like that. You're like, man, that's weird. So this is what it's like when Will Smith just doesn't make jokes, and it's just like dead serious. But I was like, I dig it. Like he has such a screen presence that I liked it. And to me, and I remember this from the first time I watched it, the movie loses so much twice, right? One is when he gets sidelined because he's injured, and you're like, oh man, so now he's just gonna be like the voice in his head. And then when he loses communication and it's just Jaden Smith, and I don't have anything like Jaden, like I think the kid does okay. He doesn't blow me away in this movie, but he can carry it. But the problem is that it's not that whether he can carry it or not. The problem is that he's not Will Smith, and you have Will Smith on screen for the first half of the movie. So when he's not there, it's like, man, that's an uphill battle, And I like the moments where it seems reality. This might have been me projecting, but the moments where it seems like reality and fiction blended, and his big Oscar clip when the voice is cracking and he's just yelling at a father that's not there. And like in my mind, I'm like reading it both ways. Like I said in Contrarians Corner, right? It's like, was this Jaden Smith just showing a lot of vulnerability? Was he aware of the fact that this movie was not great? He's just like, what do you want me to do?
You think I'm a coward? I'm going to finish this movie.
This mission has reached abort criteria. I take full responsibility. You did your best. You have nothing more to prove. Now return to the ship.
What was your mistake? Trusting me? Depending on me, thinking that I could do this?
I think it's fine, but he's not Will Smith. And Will Smith disappears from the movie for a while, and then when he comes back, he's barely there. He's almost comatose. So to me, the best thing in the movie is Will Smith, and the worst thing in the movie, in a way, is the lack of Will Smith. So it's really weird. I see what they were going for. You have Will Smith grandfather Jaden Smith into the story, and then kind of like let him go, and then I guess in a different timeline, Jaden Smith becomes this huge action adventure superstar, and he's kind of like the next Will Smith, or at least the next hot young thing. I don't know that he made any more movies after this. I mean, I didn't look up his filmography, but I know that I haven't heard of anything. I've heard of him posting weird stuff on Twitter, but I haven't heard of like any other Jaden Smith vehicles. And that could be that he grew up and he decided he didn't want to act, or that can be just that maybe this kind of like burned him out. I don't know. All this to say that I had an okay time. Like I like Will Smith. I thought, the story was fine. It made sense as much as, it could make sense. And I agree that, it's a step up from where he was, from where Shyamalan was, The Happening, Last Airbender, and then this is just like a little bit better. This at least feels like a movie. And the big moments, the thing with Zoe Kravitz, like they work. I think Zoe Kravitz is really good for as little screen presence as she has. I think that she manages to get you interested. You're invested. So I'm like, okay, I totally buy the horror of this kid watching his sister get mauled by the beast, and then that defining his life from then on. I think that's part of his breakdown. The whole ghosting thing, not so much. The big climax when he finally learns to ghost. I was like, why did this happen? And it didn't feel like I understood what Will Smith had told him, but I didn't see how that really applied that moment. Okay, so he's dying, like his dad was dying when he figured it out.
Ray using the Force, it was not.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm like, I don't get it. I'm like, what made you stop being afraid? You're dying. You should be terrified. There's nothing in this kid's like arc so far in the movie that would lead me to believe that this is the thing that makes him forget about being afraid. Yeah, the big thing for me is just that the movie that they sell you at the beginning, when Will Smith has that ominous line about what planet Earth is like now, that made me think that it was going to be a lot more exciting, being on planet Earth. When he's talking about how the planet has evolved, the planet is now a human killing machine. So to me, that creates the expectation of like every step is going to be a challenge in this journey. But no, I mean, Jaden Smith spends a good chunk of his trek just kind of like walking around. It's not like he has to be on his guard at all times. There's a couple of animals that are hostile, but honestly, that's not very different from Earth today. Like if you went walking in the jungle, you probably have to keep an eye out for the wildlife. So I didn't really get the whole, the weather is kind of crazy, but I didn't feel like Earth was this massively different planet from what we have right now. And so that's kind of like that was deflating, because I thought that was the whole point, that you're coming back to Earth and it's so different from what we're familiar with.
Well, Julio, the original cut was 130 minutes long and included more backstory on the decline of Earth and the formation of Nova Prime. However, the film was vastly re-edited after performing poorly at test screenings, and any actors playing Nova Primates were either reduced to extras or cut out entirely. The deleted footage will likely never be seen, as M. Night Shyamalan is satisfied with the theatrical cut. That makes one of us.
Would you really watch a cut of this movie that's 2 hours and 10 minutes?
Fuck no. To kind of shed some light onto some of the stuff we had talked about already, Will Smith had wanted to work with M. Night Shyamalan for several years, but was unable to find a suitable project. He personally hired him to direct this. This became the first time in 20 years that Shyamalan accepted a project based on someone else's screenplay, and the first film in Shyamalan's career where he did not appear on screen. So that sheds some light on some of the stuff that we were talking about. Okay,
so it's definitely Gary Whitta's screenplay. And then, so Will Smith goes to Gary Whitta, Whitta writes it, and then Will Smith goes to M. Night Shyamalan. He's like, I got this. I'll let you direct it, but you cannot give yourself a cameo.
Which segues into this, which is probably the most interesting. Although not credited on the finished film, co-writer/producer Will Smith was responsible for much of the movie's direction. While M. Night Shyamalan was primarily in charge of the blocking, composition of shots, placement of the camera, and the visual aspects of the film, like the color and design, it was Will Smith who personally coached Jaden Smith in his performance and dictated the development of the story and the on-screen action. After both the story and acting were heavily criticized, Shyamalan decided to take the blame. Fascinating.
I'd rather take on the critics than take on Will Smith.
That would kind of validate a little bit more of what we talked about in the first portion, that Will Smith thing that said it felt like a failure for him and bringing his son into production. If what I just read is 100% true, that would make sense why he's kind of remorseful about it. If he was the one that was kind of coaching and, giving the direction for his kid and it came across so poorly.
Yeah.
And like we've talked about with this shit before too, man, like that kid who played Ang,
Mm-hmm.
that kid was like 12. Jaden Smith is like 14 here. Probably got made fun of like wherever he goes to school or whatever. So I could see that sucking really bad. So it's a slippery slope. It's an interesting thing to discuss, and it does kind of make me feel bad. And I kind of like hearing Will Smith, one, take ownership for that, and two, kind of understand the foul that was put here. Look, what I said, like trying to put a positive spin on it in the first half. This is way too much to put on someone like Jaden Smith, someone who's no offense intended or anything like that, but not proven, had no track record going into this point of being able to carry something like this with the name that he has that comes attached to it. Like Last Airbender, that kid who played Aang, not good, but there's no Will Smith in that movie. There's no one that's like this neutron star of charisma that is, one, setting you up for failure just by being in the movie, and two, that movie was more just about, it's like an ensemble cast. It really is. Whereas this is just like the two of them for the whole movie. And even more so, just Jaden Smith for a long portion of it. So in my humble opinion, there was no way that with the parts that went into this, that this was ever going to work. Because really, when Will Smith's not on camera, you want more Will Smith, and when Will Smith is on camera, you want him to act like Will Smith and not like this reserved mute version of himself. Sorry to seem really cynical or nihilistic, but when this was over, I was like, well, that was always going to fail. If that's what they wanted to do, that was never going to work.
So to be like, even to dig into that deeper, but not to be mean, but just to like wonder out loud, would it work? Like, is the problem Will Smith? You know what I mean? Like, could you give that part, if you were to tell this story, could you give the part of Katai to someone else, a different kid, and that kid would have made it work? Or would going against Will Smith always be a losing proposition, and therefore the story can't really be told? You know what I mean? Like, if the character of Katai worked better, then automatically, like, the movie would work better. It wouldn't feel like you're just waiting for Will Smith to come back on screen. You're like, fuck yeah, this kid's on his own. And like, I wouldn't put it all on Jaden Smith. I think that the way that it's written is just so humorless that, like, the brief attempts at humor, now that we're on real talk, like that line about how his suit is black and he likes it, but he doesn't get it. It's so weird. It comes in the middle of, there hasn't been any quips for like 20 minutes, if not more. And there won't be any quips further later on. This kid has not been established as the kind of character that would say that line. And it comes on and you're like, that's weird. Like, it didn't even make me cringe. It just puzzled me. And I'm like, was he supposed to be funny? Did I peg the character completely wrong? Because he seemed like such an angry, conflicted kid all the way up to the point, and then he makes that line. I'm like, is he making a joke? Like, that's just so weird.
Yeah, it's so out of place.
And so I think that the writing doesn't help. If you wrote Katai to be someone that's, it's like he can be tortured, he can have all these hang-ups, but he can also be the kind of character that you don't mind following on his own, and somebody that's, you would think that they would have wanted to make him more different from Will Smith. And so if the Will Smith character is all rigid and not charismatic, not making jokes or whatever, then it would make sense that his son would rebel and try to be very different from his father, even though secretly he wants his father's approval. And so that would make him, I don't know, a lot more entertaining to follow. But instead, he's just kind of like bummed and I don't know. He was not a fun character to follow.
No.
And on top of that, it's like, I mean, that's what I was saying. It's like, can any other actor pull that off? Is it Jaden Smith? That was a problem that he cast his kid and his kid couldn't pull it off? Was the problem that he was playing Cypher and therefore would overpower any other actor, any other kid actor that came to play? Or is the problem the script? And I guess, it's a combination maybe of all three. But can you think off the top of your head of a young actor that could have done something that could like stand toe to toe against Will Smith and not make you miss Will Smith when Will Smith is not on screen?
I mean, at this point in time, Abigail Breslin probably. I don't know.
That would have been awesome, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, see?
One
I
of
don't
the
know.
Culkins.
Just the latest from the compound. Just throw Michael Cera in there. Just give him some like acne. If you say like kid actor at that point in time, the mid 2000s to like the early 2010s, I'm just always going to say, yeah, just put Abigail Breslin in there. Which, you've never seen Maggie, have you?
Not yet. Eternally on the watch list.
That's kind of an interesting version of what we're talking about right here. Because Arnold's so good in that when he's not on screen, you like want him back. But again, Abigail Breslin's like so good at what she does that it's like it works. I agree with what you're saying, maybe. And again, it's not just to pick on Jaden Smith. Maybe there's a situation where this could have worked a little bit better, but it just doesn't. And this movie is also a victim of what a good amount of movies from this time period are going to fall victim to. And actually, no, this movie's not a victim of anything. That makes it sound like I feel sorry for it in any way. What a lot of movies from this time period are going to show over as time goes on, this movie looks like shit. And it's because it was prepared with the whole idea of 3D in mind, with the 3D presentation. And I can't imagine how this looked good in IMAX. Interstellar, Inception, yeah, I can tell you how that looks good in IMAX. But with this, no idea, man. And some of the green screening is laughably bad because it's shot with that weird lighting that's helped to accent 3D. Specifically the part where like Smith and his kid see that guy with one leg, like, and they're like on the loading dock from Star Wars, where he wants to stand up and salute him. That's like in the first 20 minutes of the movie, first 10 minutes of the movie. It looks so bad. The lighting, like the lighting on the actors does not match the lighting in the backdrop from like what's being projected because of that whole mishmash of like the 3D to make it pop. There's not too many movies like this from that era that I really go back and watch. So it really stands out. Like this really stood out when I was watching it. I was like, dude, this looks awful. And I mean that in the sense of I could not make a movie that looks this good because no one would give me $100 million. But it does not stand the test of time, and it'll be interesting to see what other movies of this era fall into that. That really took me out of it for chunks of time. I almost want to say like I appreciate. Well, one, I just as a man, I appreciate him trying to help his kid out and do it. It's in earnest. It's not some movie where like, his kid invents the cure for cancer or something like that. It's just kind of a very by the numbers, rudimentary sci-fi movie. It's just bad. It just didn't work, man. Sometimes these things don't pan out. It's hilarious to me, just kind of in the brief research and discussion we've had on this, that this is labeled as like one of Shyamalan's bad movies, when in reality it seems like it has one of the worst reputations with none of the Shyamalan trappings, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It can't be one of the worst Shyamalan movies because it's barely a Shyamalan movie.
Exactly. He just like he did not take sunglasses off the entire time he was on set for this. It was one of those like, I want to believe he was always like had, like donut crumbs on or around his mouth and never really did anything. Just kind of, hey, Will, what's going on?
Jaden Smith is just giving it his all, and Shyamalan is on the side writing the script for Split. Like, oh, cut. Yeah. Next.
Are we good? All right. Will, you happy with that? Let's move on. He does that thing at the end when they wrap. All right, great day, everybody. You're the real stars.
What a twist!
I have to say, obviously, I said I like this movie more than you did, but also I brought up the whole thing about, well, Will Smith is making this movie for his son because, we're discussing it. We're talking about the going on screen, off screen, but watching it, it's not like that weighed on me, which is funny because a couple episodes ago, I was talking about how I found it really hard not to be annoyed by M. Night Shyamalan's cameos, which are very like, that has nothing to do with the story, that has nothing to do with the movie. That is just like very external thing of like me knowing that that's the director of the movie and how he's putting himself in the movie, just rubbing the wrong way. Here, I know that that's Will Smith and that's his son, and I know that this was clearly, his project, and I don't care. I'm like, fine, whatever, entertain me. And, the movie did. Like, the problems I have with the movie somehow have nothing to do with how it came to be. To me, that's just kind of like trivia. It's like curiosity. It actually makes it more interesting. But somehow I don't resent Will Smith, or I don't. It's like you were saying, I'm like, that's cool. He could do that for his kid. Why not? But then again, that's just me. And I don't know how many people actually turned on the movie because of that. Because they were like, why is Will Smith gaming the system or taking advantage of his status in order to give his kid, a big role, a leading role in a sci-fi epic? So I don't know, but personally, it doesn't bother me. I wonder how many people are bothered by it, and I wonder how that number compares to the number of people that are bothered by M. Night Shyamalan's cameos.
Well, I mean, if the movie had ruled, then it's like that probably would have been a moot point, or only the
right.
Pardon the pun, the contrarians would have been the ones that were pissed off about that. It's I mean, to this day, my dad is very defensive of Godfather 3. He always says it's fine. It's just not, it's not as good as Godfather 1 or 2. And I always say, okay, that can be true, but what can also be true is that its lasting legacy as a film is how bad Sofia Coppola is in it.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously she's okay. She went on to, do some things in the film industry that worked out in her favor and for the viewing public. But I mean, I don't think that's off base to say. That's like anyone who knows anything about that movie, that's always one of the first things that comes up. You know what I mean?
Right. I hadn't seen it until, I think, last year, but I knew all about it. And then it was one of the things where like, wow, the commentary surrounding the movie was actually 100% true. Like, that performance is really bad.
Yeah, and that's kind of the case here, where I think Jaden Smith got nominated for a Golden Raspberry. Yeah, won it. Will Smith won worst supporting actor.
That's
and they
not
won.
fair.
Yeah, and then they won worst screen combo. And yeah, sadly, that's just how it goes sometimes. It's a cauldron that is just kind of fucked from the start. And that's kind of going to be its legacy, is that it's this movie that was an example of nepotism that didn't pay off because the performance was so bad. Now, I'm sure, of course, I'm blanking on it right now. There's got to be cases of nepotism elsewhere in the film industry that it paid off and worked fantastically. And, that's just kind of the risk you take with it. And it's something like that, Godfather 3 or this, when you do something that's going to inherently already rub people the wrong way, in this case, I'm Will Smith, I have all this money to make this movie, I'm going to make it starring my son, and then it goes wrong, that all that does is just make the people that naysayed from the beginning like relish in it and just dance in it. And so, yeah, there's no wonder this movie has such a horrible legacy and lineage. There's got to be examples of nepotism that paid off.
Well, knocked up.
Well, I like Knocked Up, so is Leslie Mann good in that? Yes, she is, because she's not out of control.
Yeah, no, she's really good, but also I don't know that that's nepotism because, I mean, she had a career before, after.
Yeah.
Sideways, yeah. Here's a thought, like flipping what I asked you earlier. Keep Jaden Smith in After Earth. Keep the script, but instead of Will Smith, you get somebody that's less of a star, that has less star power to play Cypher. And so that way, it's not so much of an uphill battle for Jaden, right? Because now, I'm not saying cast like a nobody or a bad actor, but somebody that's not Will Smith. So you could cast, I don't know, Cuba Gooding Jr.
I guess he could have used the work at the time.
It's like I like Cuba, but I don't know that would be it. The scales might be more evenly balanced in that scenario. I don't know if they would make it a better movie, but maybe it would give Jaden Smith more of a chance to walk away with the movie.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. And you have to be someone huge to be able to go. Like, Will Smith is Will Smith. He's arguably like a Mount Rushmore level Hollywood star movie, guaranteed box office attraction of my lifetime. So to try to make him the second is just silly and not going to work unless it's like a very limited part or something like that. But I get what you're saying, and I totally agree. There could be potentially a way that would pan out, but I would like to have a conversation with Will Smith about many things, but specifically, if I ever had the opportunity to discuss this movie with him, I would say, how did your vision differ from what we saw in the end? And see if there is much difference in it, or if the failings of this movie really were just from the perspective of the anchor of it. You know what I mean?
Right. It's like, this is exactly the movie that he wanted, and it just doesn't work.
Sorry, man. Sometimes it's just the way the cookie crumbles.
It'd be awesome if Will Smith was just turned out to be an asshole, and he was like, look, I don't really care. I was just doing M. Night Shyamalan a favor. I was like, Jaden and I decided we didn't need the money, we didn't need the work. Jaden had already decided that he didn't want to pursue acting as an adult, but we figured, what the hell, M. Night, he seems like a good dude. He needed something after Last Airbender,
or he just
so
like,
we did him a favor.
I ask him a question. I'm like, how did you see this playing out? He says, fuck you, I don't have to tell you anything.
He doesn't even do that. He just unclips his microphone from his shirt.
Yeah, he gets up
away
and walks off. Be that as it may, that you enjoyed this a bit more than I did, dude. You tell me you laughed at the end where he like stumbles to his feet to salute his son. I was like, fuck off.
Yeah, I was mostly thinking this. I didn't remember. I didn't remember that he survived. I was really thinking that he didn't make it. Especially because those last shots we see of him, it looks like he's dead. You know what I mean? Like his eyes are getting glassy, and so it caught me by surprise that he was still alive. I was more like, I guess, reckoning with that and kind of like the disappointment that I wasn't gonna get to see that sad ending. I like that he hugged him, because he hugs him at some other point in the movie.
Oh yeah, and that end scene is where he actually like shows emotion for the first time in the movie.
Right. Yeah. But the whole salute thing, I mean, I guess it had to happen because it was such a big part of the movie that the kid wanted to be a ranger, and Will Smith and everybody else had told him that he wasn't ready. So, I mean, sure, salute him. They're already like, they had that other guy salute Will Smith earlier in the movie. Mm-hmm. It's just, but I didn't laugh. I was more like, well, it was inevitable. It was like Thanos. It was just inevitable.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap this up.
Whenever the MCU comes up. Well, we opened with the MCU.
So the Shyamalan anthology rages on the conclusion. The dramatic conclusion of the Shyamalan anthology is on deck with The Sixth Sense. I'm nervous, Julio. It's been years, a decade, maybe even more since I've revisited this movie. And I've talked a big game about how much I liked this movie. And obviously being a kid of the 90s, it was a big deal. So I'm going to be very interested and hopeful that holds up. But man, that Signs viewing, that might have disrupted the balance. But we'll do our retrospective following The Sixth Sense. Before
I still haven't heard what your score is for After Earth.
Yeah, I was about to say, before we look to that, though, we got to close this out by giving our official reviews. I don't consider this a failure. When it was over, I was just like, okay, I doubt I'm going to spend too much time the rest of my life really thinking about this movie or caring, and I don't foresee or know of a situation that would present itself to where I'd watch this movie again. At the same time, I was like, yeah, that's not good, but it is not what people hyped it up to be. And some of our listeners too. I know the Spit and Polish fellows, and there's a couple others that had when we said we were doing this, like, oh God. And so I thought it was going to be worse than, Last Airbender or The Happening or something. And it's not, but it's not a good movie. So all that coming together, I'm just going to give it an in the middle D.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide between, I don't know if I'm feeling generous, and I'm like, I'll give it 3 stars because in the end,
wow.
Well, you know what's key about it too?
What's that?
I think it was the last quote that I read where it called it a YA movie, and I'm like, yeah, if I was younger, I think this movie might play better, to a younger audience. It's like just scary enough, but they might find Jaden Smith more relatable, more approachable, if you're like his age. And they're like, who is Will Smith? Taking that into consideration, maybe that's makes it even less of a failure. It's not I barely like it. And that is mostly because of Will Smith and some of the things that I mentioned. So it's between 2.5 and 3. I feel like I'm feeling good today. I'm gonna give it 3 stars.
I'm feeling generous.
Yeah, I watched it. I was interested in what was happening. I was, writing notes and having an okay time. Considering the movie's ambition, that's not good. But removed from everything else, it's a movie and it works. I can't say that about The Happening. I can't say that about Last Airbender, but I can say that about After Earth. It's like, forget about who made it, forget about the behind the scenes stuff, and forget about my expectations, the world's expectations. It's just a movie that you can give it to like a kid. They'll have a fine time. That's got to count for something, just a little bit. So I'm giving it 3 stars.
There you have it. 3 down, 1 to go in the Shyamalan anthology. Sixth Sense is on deck next.
I was going to ask if we've had Bruce Willis on the show before, and of course we did. A Good Day to Die Hard.
And Pulp Fiction.
So really, where else could we go but The Sixth Sense in his filmography?
Returning back to complete the Holy Trinity here.
First, Haley Joel Osment. Maybe our first... No. She was in Little Miss Sunshine. Never mind.
Toni Collette, yeah. New Horizons in some category. Something will be appearing for the first time.
First, Donnie Wahlberg.
There you go. All right, so that's going to carry us into our perennial plugs. As always, we want to give thanks to the Festive Years, who provide us with our opening and closing tracks. They kick us off with Last Stand, take us home with Summer of 99. Be sure to head over to thefestiveyears.com for any and all Festive Years needs.
Our friend and fellow podcaster Hans Rothgieser is the man behind our logo, behind all the graphics on our webpage, on our Patreon page, on our upcoming merch. He is also a writer. He has a website, mildemonios.pe, mildemonios.pe, where you can check out all his work. You can also contact him on Twitter at mildemonios or email him mildemonios@hotmail.com. If you want a logo, if you want comics, if you want to talk to him about his zombie novels or about his podcasts. He has Nación Combi and Marginal, one about Peruvian current affairs. Peru has a new president, so I'm sure they're talking about that. And I know. And Marginal is about economy, which I'm sure also be related to whatever the new president is doing in Peru. But yeah, Hans is great. He has a new book, I mentioned it a couple episodes ago, that I actually contributed to, and as soon as I get a little bit more information from him, we'll start plugging it away. Thank you, Hans, for all your support.
And lastly, we thank Ms. Zoe Perez for helping out with our social media game. If you haven't already, be sure to go to facebook.com/Contrarian Prime and give us a like. And also, if you're on Instagram, we are too, at Contrarian Prime. Zoe helps create some better looking videos than Julio and I could for those pages, some interactive graphics, all around sharp looking stuff, and we really appreciate the effort that she puts into that for us. So, Zoe, thank you for that. And with all of that out of the way, that is going to do it for this episode of The Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong, and we will catch you next time.
Your dreams, but even so